Fink from Course in Miracles. If you don't have a Course in Miracles book and you want one, we have them for sale through Speakeasy. This is chapter 17, and it's such a beautiful little piece of writing that I wanted to read it. And it said it's about forgiveness. Forgiveness in the holy relationship. It's what is described as the forgiven world. And it says, can you imagine how beautiful those you forgive will look to you? In no fantasy have you ever seen anything so lovely. Nothing you see here, sleeping or waking, comes near to such loveliness. And nothing you will ever value like unto this, nor hold so dear. Nothing that you remember that made your heart sing with joy has ever brought you even a little part of the happiness this sight will bring to you. For you will see the face of God. You will hold this beauty the Holy Spirit loves to look upon, which he thanks the Father for. So it's just a little paragraph that says, like, can you imagine how beautiful, like you can't imagine how beautiful the world would be under the vision of your full forgiveness. It says, the most beautiful place on earth is where an ancient hatred becomes a current love. And it seems like that's an impossible thing for us to get to sometimes, but we're capable of it. So Todd, so I told Todd we were going to talk about defenselessness. And he said, what does that mean? And I picked out a few things from Course in Miracles, but I was like, oh, don't worry, you'll figure it out. And I'm sure he will. But it's also for all of us to figure out, what does that mean? What does it mean for me to come defenselessness to every situation and encounter? One thing for me it means is like in that Zen story about the student who goes to the teacher and says, tell me everything you know. And the teacher begins to pour a cup of tea, overpours it because the student's not really ready to receive it. And he says, I can't pour anything into you until you empty yourself. So I would suggest, as Todd speaks today, to see if you can come empty. You know, even if things that he says seems baffling or not applicable to you, like just see if you can open your mind to receiving wisdom that's for you to hear and maybe contemplate on how you might come more defenselessly to your own life. So please help me bring up Todd Fink.
Nice to see you again. It's like I was just here yesterday. So time is moving fast, and yes, Maureen's right. When she asked me about defenselessness, I said, what is that? And just moments ago, behind the altar, I was telling Will and Maureen separately, I'm curious to find out what I'm going to say about defenselessness. And on the phone, I don't know, it was pretty recently, when Maureen reminded me that the date is coming up and to let me know about the topic. I think I said defenselessness, so like death. She did that. I was kind of thinking like peace. But I still want to talk about death for a moment because my mind went there. It was like the first word that arose. It was the first content of my consciousness when the seed of defenselessness was planted there. And I think that came because there's nothing we can do to stop it. Now, we take up arms against death. We do whatever we can to slow the aging process, try to eat healthier, take care of ourselves, surgeries, procedures, prayers, requests to our higher power to delay the inevitable. But in the end, death as a hunter is undefeated. And since we're all on this same fishbowl where eventually the hook is going to get us, it's so strange that we don't cooperate. But that's partly because death is so taboo. It's like all the while, fish are getting plucked out of the pond, and we just keep trying to focus on what we want to do. And yet, if we took a little bit of time to realize how helpless we are in this paradigm, then it seems like the only appropriate response is unity and harmony. And it's interesting because 88% of the planet believes death is not the end, and it leads to something better, paradise in most cases. And yet, Medicare spends $200 billion annually for the last 30 days of human life in America, representing a good chunk of the total healthcare expense of America. What does that tell us? I mean, it tells me that patients and or families will do anything to delay paradise just a little, just a little longer. You know. But it also tells me that our beliefs may not be enough when that time comes for us. So we ought to break down this taboo a little bit. Only 30% of families talk about end-of-life preferences, and that's unfortunate. So when we're aware of how helpless we are with death, I think it makes things clear. Like, because there's a death, we do things that are really wonderful and really meaningful. I know there's a division of Google now that's trying to solve the problem of death. That's its sole mission. Because sometimes, well, you think, since the Industrial Revolution, we've pretty much doubled the life expectancy. But that doesn't mean we've actually extended life. What's happened is that we've gotten better at reducing premature death. We've gotten better with vaccinations for illnesses that contributed so much to infant mortality. So people were always able to live long, just most people weren't able to. So it's not really clear yet if that could ever be possible, but some scientists really think that it's just a matter of understanding the 5 or 6 ways that cells age and die. And if we can slow that down, which they've been able to do in certain laboratories with cells and petri dishes, maybe that'll happen. But imagine a world where you don't really age. Now, that doesn't mean that you can't die. It just means that the aging process isn't happening the way it used to. So then how will people live? Like, I get on a plane last minute and I fly in this weather because I know I'm going to die one day. If I knew the only way I could die is an accident, I might not leave home so often. I might not. Be a little more cautious. And what kind of life would that be? But anyways, we're defenseless against death as it is. And that ought to bring things more into focus, especially spiritually. And belief alone doesn't seem like it's going to be enough when our time comes. So we ought to contemplate it and prepare for it in whatever way we can. But that leads me back to peace, because we can cooperate and be peaceful because there's a death. And I think about how we try to maintain peace through weapons, and I think that Maureen was alluding to this also. And it's interesting because whenever in my personal life that I've put down my defenses, I find that it invites the other person to do the same. Like, I can remember playing ping pong with my dad growing up in the basement, and it really started to become like an Olympic tournament every night. And it's fun, but sometimes it's not fun to be throwing the paddle at him at the end of the match. So I thought, how do I mitigate this? So on those occasions where I didn't really want a cutthroat match at the end of my day before bed, I decided to play with my left hand, my weak hand. And that's what defenselessness is about: weakness, vulnerability. You'd be like, what are you doing? I'm like, I'm trying to get ambidextrous so there's more ways I can beat you. So if I'm only playing with my left hand, he's not getting the best of his opponent. It doesn't make sense to keep score anymore. What does it matter if I beat you when you're playing with my left hand? So he just starts working on backhand or something like that. And so now there's no point in keeping score, and then we just start talking. Talk about school, talk about life, talk about philosophy. We're still playing, but we're not competing. And so, patients and clients often tell me, I could put my arms down, but he won't, or she won't. And I said, well, maybe not in the beginning, and maybe they'll be thrown off at first, but after some time, there's no real competition if you're not getting the best of your opponent. So it takes two to compete, and when we practice this, then, peace is possible. And just like death, and the reason why I connect peace with death is because those moments when we're truly peaceful, if you reflected on that, I bet it was a moment when you lost yourself. So in a sense, you died. Even something like just immersing yourself in a sunset. There's no more thought of me and what I want and my ambitions and all that. It's just being and presence. I remember one time driving along the coast of California with 4 friends, and the sun was setting on the ocean. I said, hey, stop the car, I want to watch this for a moment. And I stepped out and I just kept walking towards it, and then I went into the water and I watched the whole thing until the sun was totally gone. And then I was like, oh my God, I've been here for like 45 minutes, and I just asked to step out of the car for a minute. But I looked to each side of me and there were my friends in the water too, just completely transfixed with the sunset. And when you go to sleep at night, this is ordinarily the only time every day we're truly peaceful. Not in dreams, because dreams can be totally chaotic. But after that, deep sleep, delta sleep, then there's nothingness. There's no more thoughts, there's no more feelings, there's no more you. And yet, ordinarily, we're not clutching the sheets at night going, oh my God, I'm about to lose myself. You welcome it. And maybe like it's not feared because we think I'm definitely going to wake up and I'm going to get to reinsert back into the matrix and I get to continue. But we don't know that. And yet, I don't think anyone comes out of deep sleep going, that was awful. So, we have all this fear, but it doesn't seem logical in terms of how we lose ourselves and what we get to experience. And then the next one is love. Because you can plan for love, and you can think that you have an outline for when you will love, but love's not a noun, love is a verb, and it just pops out of you at times, and there's no way to predict it. And so, in that sense, we're kind of defenseless also. And love isn't an exchange, really. It's an action. I mean, so when you think of when love just spontaneously flows, like a mother and a child, or a father and a child, it's not like the mother's like, well, you know, you've sacrificed as much as I have, I ought to love you. There's no way. It can never get balanced. You know, I realize that all the time with my own mother. There's nothing I could ever do to return the favor. So it's not about reciprocity. And therefore, it can just hit you. And I think we're called to do that with everybody. Now, unfortunately, because we have this notion of love as an exchange, we build up walls against it. We have to remove those barriers so that it can just flow naturally. And sometimes we think that it's not real because we tried and we failed. And then we feel lonely. And sometimes that loneliness is so intense, but you get through it only because you keep on loving. And by loving, you continue to go forward because it doesn't require that return. It's not like a business transaction where you're investing, but the stock keeps going down, so you eventually pull your investment out. And even if it wasn't returned, it doesn't mean that you don't love. So like, think of animals. We love animals. Most people believe that the animals should be protected and cared for and conserved in their natural spaces, like a park or sanctuary. And yet, if we got close to that animal, many of them would fight us. Like a tiger, you may say, I love tigers. But if you met the tiger might hurt you. And that doesn't stop you from loving. Because you don't need it to reciprocate in the same way that you feel about it. And the reason why it's possible is because of the boundary. And yet when another person hurts us in some way, then it can turn to resentment or hate or bitterness. And that's why I don't think hate is the opposite of love, because you actually need love to hate, and they're just so similar. You have to think about that person. You have to focus on that person. So to me, the opposite of love is indifference. But if we realize this with like the animals and how we love so much as long as the boundary is appropriate, then we ought to convert any of our bitterness or resentment into love again. Just make sure that the boundary is appropriate. As long as the tiger is in the sanctuary, I can love freely. Now, if I get too close, then it gets complicated. And same with people. Maybe certain people don't mix well with us, or their nature creates conflict with us. So I have to find the appropriate boundary. And then once again, I can love. And so peace, love, death, the Bermuda Triangle that we all are going to fall into. So let's do our best to put down our weapons, bring down our walls of resistance and all the barriers that we've built up against it, and live more freely and more lovingly. I look forward to conversing with you. Thank you. It's good to be here again.
So what do you think? I would love to hear from you. Leave a comment below, or you can go ahead and sign up for our newsletter at speakeasyspiritualcommunity.com so we can keep the conversation going. Because Speakeasy is all about engaging in engaging conversations. I'm Maureen Muldoon, your spiritual vixen, reminding you to love more and fear less, and don't forget to laugh. What do you say?